back to Daily Devotions through Romans. And we are going to be picking up in Romans chapter 10, verse 14 today. Actually going to go all the way through the rest of Romans chapter 10 and then just kind of touch on Romans chapter 11. And then tomorrow we're going to jump into Romans chapter 12. So we're covering a lot of ground, but it's all kind of a through line that we need to see. So we're going to just tackle it all today. We're not going to read it all today because that would take a long time. But if you have time to go and read it on your own, I would advise you to do that. Great chapters. But did you know that in America last year, there was $2.89 billion in unclaimed lottery winnings? Isn't that crazy? That means tons of people won the lottery, had some kind of winnings, and didn't realize that they had won. Basically, let's just call it $3 billion worth of winnings that people didn't know should be in their bank account. Maybe they were struggling to pay a bill. Maybe they were going to work. All they had to do is read those numbers, look it up, and know, wow, I'm a winner. Pretty crazy. There was one guy, he was 68 years old. His name was Jamie Smith, and he's from New Jersey, and he discovered that he had a winning lottery ticket for $24 million 2 days before it was expired. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. So he turns it in. Now he's a multimillionaire, $24 million. You know, Paul in Romans chapter 10, he's going to make a similar point that so many people are sitting on the greatest prize money of all, the greatest prize of all. But so many people don't ever claim it. It's the gift of salvation, right? We have something even greater than the lottery winnings. We have the ticket to heaven. We have abundant life today. We have forgiveness of our sins, no longer separated from Jesus Christ, no longer separated from God because of what Christ has done. Amazing stuff. And he's making a case here in Romans, how could they know that they've won the lottery unless somebody goes and tells them? Can you imagine if somebody had gone to these people's houses and been like, yo, we heard that you have the winning lottery ticket. You just need to claim it. You just need to turn it in. But there's nobody to do that. So let's read in Romans chapter 10. We'll start in verse 14 here. And it says this, but how can they call on him? Where is it here? Verse 14. There it is. But how can they call on him unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him unless they have heard about him? And how could they hear about him unless someone tells them? And how will anyone go and tell them without being sent? That is why the scripture says, how beautiful are the feet of the messengers who bring the good news. But not everyone welcomes the good news. For Isaiah the prophet said, Lord, who has believed this message? So faith comes from hearing, that is, hearing the word or the good news about Jesus Christ. But I ask, have the people of Israel actually heard the message? Yes, they have. The message has gone out through the earth, and the words through all the world. But I ask, did the people of Israel really understand? Yes, they did. For even in the time of Moses, God says, I will arouse your jealousy through people who are not even a nation. I will provoke your anger through the foolish Gentiles. And later, Isaiah spoke boldly for God, saying, I was found by the people who were not looking for me. I showed myself to those who were not asking for me. But regarding Israel, God said, all day long I opened my arms to them, but they were disobedient and they were rebellious. Disobedient and rebellious. So he asks a bunch of questions. How can they call on him if they don't believe? So if you don't believe, you're separated from God, right? How can they believe in him if they haven't heard? It's those people that have the lottery tickets. Like you've won, but you just haven't turned it in. How can they hear unless someone tells them? You got to be told. And then how can someone tell them unless they are sent? And ultimately, we are the ones that are sent. Go into all the world, making disciples. It doesn't mean that you have to go somewhere to do it. The Greek suggests go. Wherever you go, make disciples. Go is not the main imperative there. It's not the main operative word. It's make disciples. Go. Wherever you go, even if you don't have the wherewithal to go far, make disciples where you are. The gospel isn't something that we make up. It's not our message. They hear the reporters always say, we don't make the news, we just report the news. Being mad at the reporter over something bad that's happening in society, well, that doesn't really do us any good because they're just telling you what's going on. Well, in the same way, we are reporting the news. We don't need to be theologians. We don't need to be pastors or scholars, just the same way as these news reporters don't need to have understanding of ins and out of politics. They don't have the complete understanding of science to interview a scientist or to bring you the news about, some new science that's been discovered. Science? Can you discover science? Something that science has discovered. Same idea. You don't need to be scholars, but you do need to show up, and you do need to share the good news, and you have to know the good news, right? Paul, he says, "How beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news," and that's Romans 10:15. It's funny because feet aren't generally considered the beautiful part, right? Eyes are, vision. That's where the beauty is. People's always, I've never had anybody come up to me and be like, you know what? I was just admiring you from afar, and your feet are so beautiful. Just the way they're all crusty and cracked. They're just not beautiful things. So feet in and of themselves aren't beautiful. The way that the message is carried doesn't have to be beautiful. The thing that's beautiful is the message, and that's the message of salvation. So Paul gets into, just 4 types of people in this passage that need to hear the good news. And I've kind of broken them down this way. There's number 1, which is the atheists. The people that don't even believe God. It says in our passage here, their voice has gone out into all the earth. He's talking about, he's actually quoting Psalm 19, 1-4, and over in the Psalms we see, God's existence being written in creation, that whether or not you believe it, the evidence is all around us. A lot of people refuse to believe because they feel like there's no evidence. But really it's because they don't want to be accountable to God. They don't want to believe, because if they believe that God exists, now they're accountable to this God. There's something required of them. And so I don't know if a lot of people that claim to be atheists are either angry with God, or they have had a bad experience in religion in some way, shape, or form. I haven't met too many straight down the line atheists. Usually there's some kind of excuse, but they do exist, and they still need to hear the good news. It used to be that, you could just walk up to somebody and be like, "Oh, do you know that God has a plan for your life and he loves you? And here's God. His name is Jesus," and people go, "Oh, yeah, cool." Now there's an extra step, right? Did you know that God actually exists, and here's the evidence of it, and he now he's Jesus, and here's the good news. And we talked about it all throughout Romans. You have to share the bad news before you share the good news, that we've all sinned, we've all fallen short of God's glory. People who don't believe in God don't want to hear that at all, because how could I sin against a God that doesn't exist? So those are very challenging ones, but they do exist, and that beautiful message spread by cracked, crusty, nasty feet can become a reality for so many people, but it has to be carried there. We have to be willing to take it there, even in the face of scrutiny. And then there's religious people, believe it or not. It says in verse 19, "I will make you envious of those who are not a nation." These are the people that are promised, people that are very religious. They are obeying all the laws of the Lord, but they haven't quite understood what it means to be saved. They believe in God, but they're still acting as if they have to earn salvation, not receive salvation. Pew Research shows that some of the most certain believers are in groups that distort the gospel. What do I mean by that? Well, you ever talk to a Mormon? No matter what you share with them, no matter how you point out the flaws in their beliefs, they are so certain that they'll go door to door. Same with Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, they are so certain of what they believe. Those are religious people. It doesn't mean that what they believe is true. And so religious people need to hear the gospel, and those are some of the hardest ones to break through, as well as atheists. Maybe even more so hard to break through. Then there's the lost people. It says in verse 20, "I was found by those who did not seek me," right? These are lost people. These people that aren't seeking God at all. They don't know that the way that they're living is displeasing to him, because they're just lost. We come out of, in the 2000s, early 2000s, late 90s, this thing called the seeker sensitive movement. And we started creating church to be sensitive to people who are seeking God. But Romans 3:11 says, no one is truly wise. No one is seeking God. Truly. Everyone is lost. Now, we might be seeking something. And the problem with the seeker-sensitive movement is that they were seeking something. And so we tried to be all things to all people and then ease them into hearing the gospel. But here's the thing. We don't find God. He finds us. And he sends messengers, beautiful feet, to share the good news, but also the bad news. And so a lot of times in the seeker-sensitive movement, we would shy away from talking about sin because, well, we don't want to turn people off. But, man, I'd rather offend people a little bit than to allow them to continue living in offense to God. And so lost people need to know. And then there's the stubborn people. He talks about them in 21. All day long I've held out my hands to these disobedient and obstinate people. Some people will hear the truth and they will still reject it. Over and over they will hear it. But even to those stubborn people, God's mercy is available. So as he's talking about beautiful feet, he's setting up Romans chapter 11, because in Romans chapter 11, he hits home because, again, there's probably a lot of people going, okay, this is very confusing. Like, Gentiles can receive mercy and we've been living the way that we're supposed to. You know, we're stubborn, we're religious, and we're so certain in what we know. But now you're saying that that's not the way to get saved. That's not the way to God. Like, tell us. And so he's setting all these things up because in chapter 11, he's going to drive it home. And he's going to say, God's mercy is for everyone. It's for everyone. And so we need to, just as we've received mercy, go and share that mercy with others. He says it in Romans 11:30 through 31. He says, just as you were disobedient to God, but now have received mercy, so they too may now receive mercy. So what does that mean? It means you need to share your personal testimony. I know it's hard to do, especially if God's brought you out of things that you're ashamed of. You don't want to really talk about it very much. But man, no one can argue with your testimony. It says in Revelation that we have overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. We need to share our testimony. Because here's the thing, you can't change your past. But your past is a part of the story that could change someone's future. You can't change your past, but your past is a part of the story that could change someone's future. It's one of the most powerful tools that you have is your personal testimony. I was once blind, but now I see. I was dead, but now I'm alive. I was once this, and now I'm that. You know, it's amazing how you can connect with atheists, stubborn people, religious people, just through the power of sharing your testimony, what God's done for you, because it's laden with that word mercy. It shows the mercy of God, and his mercy prevails over everything. You know, the gospel is that winning lottery ticket that so many people don't know that they have. And so we need to be the ones to go out there and let them know. I remember in Back to the Future, Biff Tannen gets the sports almanac and then takes it back in time, and he says, look, here's all the information that you need to know. Just read all this stuff, right? And you bet on these things and you will be successful. And then that's what happens, you know, Back to the Future. Well, God has given us his word. He's given us the sports almanac. He says, bet on me, bet on my son, and you will always win. And so you might be thinking, well, that's great. For me, I'll hang on to that, but I'm not an evangelist. You know, we're not all called to be evangelists, but we all are all called to have beautiful feet. We're all called to evangelize. And if you think your feet are not beautiful, well, think again, because all those cracks, all the weird looking toes, everything that is a part of your past could be the key to unlocking someone's spiritual future. So that's what I have for you today. There's a suggestion to say, hey, maybe we end with a question. That would be a discussion question to get things going in our discussions. And so actually, I would love to hear, what is your testimony? Can you articulate your testimony? I would take the opportunity to maybe take 5 minutes, just think about it, put it into a few paragraphs, maybe just one paragraph. I once was, what was it? And now you're found. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I once was a drug addict, but now I'm not. I'm found. I once was you fill in the blank. Full of anger, but now I'm full of joy. Because the moment you can articulate your testimony, you can, number one, encourage others, and number two, reach the lost. So that's what I have for you today. We will see you tomorrow.